Yeah, been a while since we've been here, huh? The old late night Sunday videos. Recently they've been consumed by streams, but I don't feel like streaming today just because I don't feel like talking to people today. And no ifs, ands, what's about. It's just one of those days where, you know, either sitting and talking for like 10 minutes to no one versus 3 hours to people. You know, it's an easy pick today. And before any conspiracy theorists just try and spin a narrative right quick, this has nothing to do with the IQ test from the last stream. It turns out I read it wrong, and my IQ is not 11, but a rather respectable, formidable, and handsome 116, which is decidedly above average. So in spite of the fact that I was getting rampaged on while innocently taking the test, moving forward, I'd very much appreciate it if I was referred to as Mr. 116, 116. In any case, it has been a while since we did a Sunday video, you know, just, you know, some trash, over-the-top, cheesy video with some melodramatic piano music. There it is. And the last Sunday video was what? I think the murder investigation into Clothar Albert. This is the strange death of Clothar Albert. Clothar was a crackhead who died of drugs. And ultimately, the conclusion was, no matter how bizarre the death, it doesn't really matter because he's a filthy Khaenri'ahn, but doesn't that bother anyone else? I mean, how did we get here? How did these Khaenri'ahns debase themselves so thoroughly, reducing their very existence to something less than human? How did they orchestrate their own downfall so catastrophically that the world had no choice but to intervene, dragging them from the abyss of their own making? Khaenri'ah, struck first, rabid, reckless, and blinded by their own delusion, lashing out in a pathetic, hubris-drenched tantrum, all for a change that was never necessary, never wanted, and never theirs to make. I guess what I'm asking is, Khaenri'ah, why? Nope. Montages go to heroes and not crackheads! And my friends, you have my word that my goal with this documentary is to be as accurate and unbiased and neutral to the truth, no matter how grim it may be. Rest assured, my friends, Mr. 116 isn't biased. And speaking of grim, when discussing these bitch-ass Khaenri'ahns, we must of course delve into their highly suspicious origins, which itself is something of great intrigue. My friends, if I were to ask you at a glance, how many nations does Teyvat have? You'd answer 7. There are 7 nations presently, and there have always been 7 nations under the dominion of 7 entities, be they sovereigns or gods. And while yes, there have been other smaller nations in Teyvat's histories, they have nothing on the original 7 that existed even before the arrival of the heavenly principles. Quote, 40 winters entomb the flames, and 40 summers churn the seas. The 7 sovereigns were vanquished, and the 7 nations submitted to the heavens. These 7 nations would be merged into one unified civilization for a time, and a utopia would exist until the arrival of that bastard crackhead Dragon King Evil. Upon forbidden knowledge. Ruined everything. War consumed the lands. The abyss invaded the earth, causing the sovereign of sovereigns to send down those heaven-sent divine fucking nails to heal the world. One of the acceptable losses was Sal Venenir, who got nailed, turning the once lush mountain into this snowy piece of shit that it is today, which led to the nation's downfall. That small little tidbit aside, it's around this time rumors of peoples creating a godless nation began to arise. Quote, I've heard of people who are building a new nation without gods. Perhaps they'll have the power to stand against this world. And it's here, right at the very start of their story, their downfall has already begun. My friends, this is the cardinal sin of pride. Rejecting the authority of God and placing oneself above the divine. Khaenri'ah's decision to exist without gods wasn't just independence, it was hubris. The belief that they could surpass the divine, that they didn't need Celestia, that they were above the order of creation itself. If you're wondering how I arrived at this conclusion that they thought themselves haughty, we must look at their next sin, the sin of sloth. My friends, Khaenri'ah was a subterranean nation. Presumably, this location was chosen so they could live in a place where the gods' gaze does not fall, yet they wished to have the best of both worlds. In sealing themselves away, they rejected the divine, cast off the gods as if they were shackles, but they could not abandon creation itself, could they? No. They longed for what they had forsaken, and so, in their arrogance, they fashioned their own mockeries of life. Soulless mechanical imitations. Bishops would become ruin drakes. Hypostases would become the perpetual mechanical array. Sea creatures would become ruin scouts. The list goes on and on. This is not progress, my friends. This is indifference towards the soul. The soul created by the heavenly principles. This is sloth, the apathy of the spirit, a refusal to bear the burden of true creation, a rejection of the toil and suffering that gives life meaning. They did not seek to build, they sought to replace, to take without reverence, to craft without soul. Now these two sins, pride and sloth, as dastardly as they were, in the grand narrative of Khaenri'ah's rise and fall, were contained within the borders of their own arrogance. They were problematic, absolutely, but they did not lead directly to the cataclysmic destruction of their nation. In the eyes of Celestia, I can vouch, if one chooses to act in vain and defy divine authority, it is of little consequence. The world, after all, is but a sandbox for the beloved creations of the heavenly principles. So long as you do not threaten the sandbox, everything within it remains fair game. You may disrespect the creators, you may shy away from their rule, or even outright reject them. But the moment you begin to threaten the sandbox and those within it, that's when the true reckoning begins. Which is why for Khaenri'ah, it was never enough. Never enough to exist within their own little microcosm, untouched by the outside world. It wasn't enough to reject the gods and their rule. No, they wanted more. More than their nation could offer, more than their creations could bring, more than their own elemental power could sustain. Having fallen victim to the sin of greed, they craved forbidden knowledge, the kind that should never have existed on Teyvat in the first place. And so, in their insatiable hunger, they committed perhaps the most unforgivable sin of all. They turned to the abyss. But what would Khaenri'ah do with the abyss, with all that dark, corrupting power? My friends, they radicalized themselves to strengthen their heinous resolve. Khaenri'ah's next sin would be born not of longing, but of disdain. It is the sin of envy. They looked upon the nations of Teyvat, their people blessed by the gracious gods they had long since rejected, thriving under divine rule, and yet to Khaenri'ah, this was nothing but weakness. And because of it, they'd grow to hate the surface dwellers. Look at this interaction between a Khaenri'ahn and someone from Sumeru.
Curses, a child!
Hey!
Look at me! I will utter no prayer, nor will I sing your praises.
Hey, whoa! Look, sir, there's no need to get so worked up.
Once a murderer, always a murderer. Curse, you wretched, vile citizens suffer.
How could these nations, shackled by celestial will, accept what Khaenri'ah called deceitful blessings? How could they kneel before the gods who Khaenri'ah claimed were keeping them blind and subjugated? Khaenri'ah did not envy their power, they hated it. In their twisted belief, they saw themselves as the heroes, the ones destined to free this world from its divine chains, and they would do so with the abyss, using its dark power to bring about the death of the gods currently taking care of billions of people. But to keep this resolve alive for thousands of years, they needed more than just ambition. Through the sin of wrath, their burning hatred for the gods fanned the flames of their resolve, and through the sin of lust, their obsession with breaking free from fate became a maddening desire to seize control of the very threads of fate itself, even if it meant the complete destruction of Teyvat. And so, it came to this. Do you guys know what the most consequential thing Khaenri'ah ever did was? It's nothing. They never let go of their unfounded hatred for the divine. They never ceased their endless taking, nor their tampering with the abyss. They just kept consuming, gorging themselves on dark power, until they succumbed to the one sin to end all sins, the sin of gluttony, and in that moment, they lost control, and the cataclysm happened. 500 years ago, the Abyss nearly wiped out Teyvat. We lost many good... By the way, Khaenri'ah did that thing. Bitch-ass Khaenri'ahs. We lost many good people during that event. Many innocent people. Archons died. Friends died. Families died. All because Khaenri'ah refused to take a knee, refused to stop. Every sin, every action led to this inevitable end. A world on the brink of annihilation, all for their prideful and insatiable thirst for power. And in the end, it wasn't just Khaenri'ah that paid the price. It was us all. So in the aftermath to the war, the heavens finally granted Khaenri'ah their wish. Khaenri'ah, you see, had rejected the world, not wishing to be a part of it. So the gracious heavenly principles responded, granted their wish, and levied the curse of wilderness, ensuring the worlds would now reject Khaenri'ah.
I'll be leaving soon.
Did you know what was about to happen in Khaenri'ah? I had some sense of it. That place was not somewhere that any Archon could afford to ignore.
I don't know why.
So, not long ago, we met a guy called Ding. He told us about Khaenri'ah and the punishment of the gods. Zhongli, you're a god. You've lived through thousands of years of history. Surely you experienced the incident?
I cannot say.
Why? You can't even give us a thread of information? This is so important to us.
I understand, but I must apologize. This is my contract.